we're going to talk about taking time-integrated air samples using the GilAir 5 pump. These samples are collected in a variety of media for a variety of different analytes that would be determined as part of the project plan. You can collect filter samples, which are for particulate-based contaminants, either just dust itself or metals, other fibers, etc. Also, we have sorbent tubes, which I'll show in a little bit, that can be collected for gaseous contaminants. We're going to be collecting samples with the appropriate media that's obtained from the laboratory. And these samples can be collected for various durations of time, from 15 minutes for short-term exposure limit samples to full shift 8-hour samples, or even longer, depending on the circumstances. The flow rates vary depending on the method, and can range from 0.1 liters per minute up to 5 liters a minute. And so it really is a wide variety of media, flow rates, durations that can be collected using this method. And it depends on but it will be outlined in the project plan. So we begin by having our pump. These are battery operated and need to be charged before use. They can also be operated plugged in if the sample duration is long. So we're going to begin by setting our flow rate, which in this case I'll set at 1.5 liters a minute. So we're going to use these filter cassettes. Filters have obviously an inlet and an outlet. You want to make sure the direction of airflow is appropriate and passes across the filter. You can see the filter sits right here in the cassette. In this other cassette, this is a 3-piece cassette, it sits right here. Regardless, we want to be sure that the airflow goes across the filter and into the pump. So in this case, I'm going to use a dummy to set my flow rate for multiple pumps. So I like to label my dummy so I don't accidentally use it as an actual sample. So I'll write dummy on it. So to attach a filter to the pump, I need a lure adapter. So I'll put that on the end of my tubing here, and then that connects to my pump. So to set my flow, using my dummy, I'll take the caps off, attach it to the lure adapter here, and then this end goes to our rotometer, or flow meter. I'm going to turn the pump on and take multiple readings with my rotometer. And in order to do that, I have to turn it on using the power button. And then it defaults to only taking one measurement at a time. And if you want to take continuous measurements, you have to hold down the read auto button until it clicks, like that. And now it's set to automatic read. So I'm going to adjust the flow rate of my pump using this screw right here, either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on whether I want the flow higher or lower. The pump turns on just with this switch right here. It's also important, we have a timer here that will count up from when it was started. And so if you ever had a situation where the pump fails before you collect the sample, you can actually go back and get the elapsed time from this timer so you can know the actual time that the sample was collected. This pump also has a high and low flow adapter on it, right here. Right now it's set to, or I'm setting it to on, which means low flow, but typically less than 0.5 liters a minute. But in this case, I want to set it to 1.5 liters, so I'm going to turn it off. And so that will allow me to do that above 0.5 liters. And it also depends on the media, the back pressure across the media. So when I turn the pump on, it will flow, and I'll begin to take readings. I'm pretty close right now. I'm at 1.57. So I'm going to adjust it down slightly, going counterclockwise. This does take time, and if you have multiple pumps that you have to set at the beginning of a day, for example, you want to make sure you allow plenty of time to do this process. So often we'll show up, at least 30 minutes, if not an hour before we want to begin sampling, just to make sure everything is set up. I want to get a few readings in a row that are stable, and then record my on flow. So I'm at 1.48, and so I'm going to accept that, and that will be my on flow. So when we use a tripod, we are typically collecting an area sample. We want to make sure that obviously the tripod is raised up to breathing height between 4 to 6 feet. And now we have our new cassette, not the dummy. Some media type have expiration dates. Some don't. This filter does not, but sorbent tubes do. So we want to make sure that we're always sampling with media that's not expired. So I'm going to take my sample ID in this case and put it on my cassette. Take the 2 caps and attach it here, so I'm ready to sample now. So when I begin sampling, I turn the pump on, obviously, and I'm sampling. So at the time of start, I want to record, of each sample, I want to record the sample ID, the floor, the location, the QA type, whether it's a sample, a primary sample, a duplicate, which would be 2 samples side by side for the same duration, a field blank, and a media blank. I also want to record the rotometer ID, which in this case is on the EH&E barcode here. And in this case, the barcode, there is no barcode, so we'll record the serial number, which is right here. We'll record the flow on, rotometer read on. We'll record the time on, and we're done. We'll record the time off. and the flow off. And in order to collect the flow off, we want to use the actual sample that was on the device for the duration of the time. So if we were sampling, we would turn it back on and do this as quickly as possible. We will take our off flow. And in this case, there was no change, so we'll record that no change here, or record the off flow here. And then we'll calculate the duration of the sample in minutes, and then we'll calculate the volume of the sample based on the average of the on flow and the off flow times the duration. When we're done, we're going to cap these and ship them to the laboratory. A field blank would be the exact same thing as a primary sample, except for we're not going to pass air through it. So we're going to take the caps off. We're going to put a sample ID on it and ship it to the laboratory. A media blank would be the same thing, except for we don't open it at all. We leave the caps on. And then our field and media blanks get recorded here by sample ID and QA type, FB for field blank, MB for media blank. We just sampled what was is a two-piece 37mm cassette, which required the lower adapter. We could also sample with a three-piece 37mm cassette, depending on the project plan. These samples are often collected what's called open face. So when we're setting our flow rate at the beginning and to collect the off flow, we have to leave this cap on, and we would take our flow measurements like this. But we often sample this type of media open face, which means that we take this top cap off. This is a cassette opener. Sometimes there's a band here that has to be cut, and you can cut it right there. But then you use this to pop the top off of the sample. So now the filter is open, so this is an open-faced sample. So we would connect it like that and collect our sample. And when we're done, take our flow rate by putting the cap back on. It's important when you're doing open face sampling that you put your sample ID not on the thing that you're going to remove, but keep your sample ID on the bottom of the cassette. Area samples like this on a tripod would be collected at about a 45-degree angle ideally. So whether that's an open face or a closed face cassette. We could also collect samples using sorbent tubes. These have to be opened at either end prior to sampling, but the process is exactly the same, where we take on flows and off flows. The only thing with these is it's really important that the direction of airflow go correctly. So every sorbent tube has an arrow that indicates the direction of airflow. So in this case, the arrow's pointing towards the pump and the direction of airflow. So when we collect this sample, we don't need the lower adapter, and we can attach the tube like that after it's broken. We can also collect personal samples with these kinds of pumps, which in that case you don't need the tripod, obviously. And we're going to collect and attach the pump in the breathing zone of the worker that we're sampling. So we can do that with a two-piece cassette, for example, with a lower adapter, using a device like this, which we connect here, making sure that we're not going to crimp the tubing, and then we attach it in the breathing zone of the employee. There's also holders that look like this that attach to the tubing here and then go in the breathing zone on the lapel of the worker. Same thing with the sorbent tube. Oftentimes, these pumps can actually connect to a belt and then go over the shoulder of the worker and onto the lapel. But Sometimes we have multiple types of samples that we need to collect at the same time with multiple pumps. So we have to use either a backpack that can hold the pumps with tubing that comes up to the breathing zone. We also have special vests that hold multiple pumps that workers can wear. We've also done area samples, personal samples actually with long tube connected to people that so they can move about a small area and yet still collect a personal sample. So that is area sampling using the GilAir 5 personal air sample.